Hello, my name is Kerri-Ellen Kelly, and this is my presentation on genealogy and family history, as well as a project for you to do using the elements that I've created for you. As I said, my name is Kerri-Ellen Kelly. I live in the U.S. in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. This was inspired when I was brainstorming on possible ideas because of a trip that I took a year ago with a friend. And we were going out to New England and seeing multiple things. I mentioned that I really wanted to go to Plymouth Plantation because I'd never been there. And in the process, I contacted my aunt and I said, we're going out. I want to see Plymouth Plantation. I know that we have a Mayflower ancestor. Can you tell me if there's anything in particular I need to see while I'm out there? And she came up with some ideas, and I did a little research and found some ideas of my own, and my best friend was very willing to incorporate these into our trip. So during our trip, I got to not only see things connected with my Mayflower ancestry, but also my Revolutionary War ancestry, and it was very emotional, as well as going and seeing, going in the footsteps of my more recent ancestors, my Busha, my great-grandmother on my mother's side, who I know. I mean, there's even somebody whose footsteps I trod in that I actually remember from my childhood, my great-grandmother. So this was a very emotional trip, and I'm sharing some of that with you as well as sharing a project with you. I hope that you enjoy this. So this is the lineage to the Revolutionary War. What you can't see behind me in the corner is me and my mother. And then you see it goes to my maternal grandmother. I did omit some names on the more recent ancestry, but then I took up the actual names for the rest of it. And you can see it goes through all the way to where Elmonda Estabrook and Elliot Hopkins were married. Now, Elliot Hopkins' lineage is where I get the Fairbanks line, and I go and actually visit the ancestral Fairbanks house, which you'll see. But also from Elmonda Estabrook, that's how I get to Samuel Estabrook, who is my Revolutionary War ancestor. Apparently I actually have another one, but at the time I took this trip that wasn't documented, and I'm not sure that my aunt has actually documented my other Revolutionary War ancestor, Moses Baldwin. But I will have to follow up with her. But on this trip I was specifically looking for Samuel Estabrook's grave, and I found it. So moving on, now I did mention that I have Mayflower ancestry as well. So on this screen, you could see, and I'm covering up. That's the trouble with incorporating the video. I'm covering up the name of Samuel Estabrook, who is right here in the corner. Samuel Estabrook married Esther Rounds, and her ancestry goes through Renew Carpenter and Jotham Carpenter. Jotham Carpenter married Desire Martin, and backwards from Desire Martin, my ancestry goes back to the Mayflower. She was Mercy Billington's daughter, and then we had Frances Billington and John Billington, who both came over on the Mayflower. Francis Billington was a teenager, and he came over with his father on the Mayflower. So my John Billington, who actually signed the Mayflower Compact, is my ancestor. He's a bit infamous as well. He was executed for murder in the Pilgrim colony. And I have relatives somewhere in this country who I'm told by my aunt are trying to clear his name, that they think he was framed and unfairly accused. But we shall see. I don't have specific knowledge about that. So this is I mentioned that I have relatives who I specifically remember. This is Maria and Wiktor Koker, Maria Porgajelska, or it was Americanized somewhat to Porgajelski, like a lot of Polish names ended in ski, but originally it was ska. And she married Wiktor Koker, and that actually started my more immediate ancestry. My grandfather was Stanley Koker, and he was the one of multiple sons of Maria and Victor, who are buried in Calumet City. But so they came over from Germany. They had been living in Austria. They're both of Polish descent, but they had been living in Austria. There's some areas that are right near the border that go back and forth throughout history as to whether they're Austria or Poland. But they came over through Ellis Island, and so one of the other things I wanted to see was Ellis Island, and my friend again obliged me. What you see on the side here are in fact the actual manifests showing Maria and Victor. I downloaded these from ellisisland.org. These are my aunt's certificates for the Mayflower Society and the Daughters of the American Revolution. I did blank out her name as well as her membership numbers, but these are the actual certificates. So you can, and if I were to submit some additional birth certificates, marriage certificates, etc., in order to document my lineage from my aunt downward to me, I could actually join both organizations using the research that she's already established. Something I'm working on. I don't have all of the certificates in place yet. All right, this is some very emotional moments for me. Below my picture on this video, you see me in front of the Statue of Liberty. It was very moving when I was on the ferry going over to the Statue of Liberty and seeing her and realizing that my great-grandparents did the exact same thing. And one of the things that on the prior screen that I didn't mention is they were age 17 and 19, if you happen to notice, when they came to America. 17 and 19 years old. That's not even adult by most people's standards, although I became pregnant with my son at age 19 and was barely 20 when he was born, so I was a single mother at 19. But I remember how terrifying that was. And to know that my great-grandparents came over here at roughly the same age or younger is just, that had to have been overwhelming. And they were leaving everything they knew behind them. So this is one of the signs that's in the registry room at Ellis Island about the process that people go through. And this is marking some of the points that they go in the process. This is actually me visiting Ellis Island. The pictures on the bottom show what it looked like for them. The picture in the center is me sitting on what is actually one of the original benches still in the registry room. They've preserved, not actually preserved, I mean you can actually sit on them, as I did. That I was told that this is specifically one of the original benches. And it was such a moving experience to be sitting there knowing that I was in the same place that my great-grandparents walked. Just amazing. There are a lot of exhibits outside, in the halls adjacent to this large registry room. There are a lot of exhibits that you can see, and we did. I have so many pictures. So this is visiting my Mayflower ancestry. On the right you see some pictures of Plymouth Plantation, and it is in fact adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean. Down here, this is the monument, the first burying ground to the passengers who passed before the first Thanksgiving, and there were a lot of them who passed. I'll show you in the next screen. And so that Plymouth Plantation, or Plymouth and Patuxet, it's much more comprehensive than just the replica village itself, and they do have reenactors there. It's quite a wonderful experience. In the center, this is a replica of the Mayflower. It is not completely to scale, but it is, I believe it, I believe it is not completely to scale. It doesn't seem big enough to hold that many people, but it is a replica that was built in the modern era, and I did go and visit it. On the right side is me next to Plymouth Rock with a close-up picture of Plymouth Rock right below there with the 1620 etched on it. This is, in fact, this is the First Parish Church, and it has a sign right here in the middle of all of the Mayflower passengers, as well as below them exactly how many didn't make it. The stained glass pictures are the signers of the Mayflower Compact, and my ancestor is right, it's on the second one, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names down is John Billington. And up in the upper right is me actually visiting the former site of John Billington's house in 1621, which is at the top of Leyden Street. It's now a sandwich place, and we ate lunch there. So, again, so many emotions, so fun. This is me visiting the Fairbanks ancestry, which I mentioned that was the other line on the lineage page. This is the ancestral Fairbanks house built by Jonathan Fairbanks, who was a wool merchant. And I also visited the Old Village Cemetery, which is also known as the Old Dedham Cemetery. I don't have any of my direct ancestors' graves to report, but there are a lot of Fairbanks buried in that cemetery, and I took a picture of a few of them. But again, very exciting I was not able to go inside the Fairbanks house because it was closed. It's also a museum as well as the original house, but I did get to walk around it. This was one of my major goals for the trip. This is in fact the Old Pine Cemetery, and this is the grave of Samuel Estabrook, my Revolutionary War ancestor. And you see me on the right, behind the grave. Yes, I was careful not to walk in front of it. I don't want to walk on top of someone's grave. I was very careful when walking through the cemetery. We combed that cemetery for quite a while because it wasn't organized in any real fashion that we could see. We eventually did find a message board at the front, not the entrance that we walked through that you see in the picture there, but over by the road in front there was a listing of all the people buried there. It still didn't seem intuitive as to how to find the graves. So we were there in a very light drizzle for about an hour trying to find this, and we finally found him. On the left, bottom left, there's also a couple other Estabrooks that we found. I'll have to do some research to see if they're related, how they're related, if anything. One is Nehemiah Estabrook, and the other one is Polk Estabrook. You can see it's very hard to read the gravestone for Samuel Estabrook because there is a lot of lichen on it. I had to scrape a little bit just to be able to see and make sure that it was in fact Samuel's gravestone. This now is the project. Now that I've shared a lot of the my history and my sojourns in New England, I just wanted to share now a project. And I decided that I wanted to replicate the gravestones, all the really cool gravestones that I was visiting. We visited multiple cemeteries, not just the two that were shown in this presentation. We visited a cemetery in Salem. We visited another one where a lot of the Fairbanks were buried. Besides the Old Village one, we also went to what's called the New South Cemetery in Sherburne, Massachusetts. We did not, I was told that at one point some of my ancestors had been buried there, but there's no headstones there, so if they're buried, there's no proof of it. But we did go visit that. So anyway, this is the card using the gravestones and some of the greenery that we visited. This was meant to emulate a cemetery, but given that this is October and I wanted a theme for the card, that perhaps might be useful to somebody who wasn't just doing it for family history like me, I made it a Halloween card. I also did scrapbook pages that I'll show you later, using these same elements plus some other items. But I just wanted to share all of the elements of this card with you so that if you choose, you can make it yourself. So I took one die from 4 different die sets. I've shown you exactly which die, and I've showed you the kind of gravestones that result from it. They're all, and I'm going to make this presentation available as a PDF handout, so that you can deal with not being able to see the entire text because of me having me in the corner. They were all cut in 3 different colors of cardstock: basic gray, gray granite, and smoky slate. I either trimmed or covered up the bottom where it wasn't squared off. The first die is squared off, the other items are not. But I either covered them up or I cut it square. Now to stamp these gravestones, I started out with these cutout shapes. I then used the watercolor shapes. I used the rectangle because it was large. I wanted to get a mottled look to them. So I stamped on them first with Sahara sand. Didn't matter which color cardstock I picked. I used Sahara sand ink universally. Then on top of that, I used the speckle stamp from Quiet Meadow, and I stamped using Whisper White on top of that because I wanted it to look like the lichen. I wanted these to look aged. Then I added some decorative elements. I didn't go to the point of, actually putting names on these or anything, but I did put, some leafy sprigs from willow tree and graceful tiles. And I used those being basic gray. I stamped it off so that you got a much lighter effect. The stone wall was fairly simple. I used Sahara sand. I used the stacked stone stamp and stamped it with Sahara sand, so you got a tone-on-tone look. And then I dry embossed the entire piece using the Brick and Mortar 3D embossing folder. I did use a much larger piece so that I could do it, save myself some steps, do it all in one, and then I could cut down pieces of that stamped and embossed piece and to make my little pieces of wall. Because I wanted to do the scrapbook page pieces as well as the card pieces at the same time. That is 4.5 inches by 1 inch, as I recall. Now, to make the foliage, I just used the willow tree dies, the willow dies, and then once they were cut out, and it was important to do it once they were cut out, I also then took the willow tree stamp, the same stamp you see at the top in the picture, and then I stamped on the old olive cardstock with Parakeet Party ink, and I just turned the stamp multiple directions, so then you get this variegated look. It's almost like if you'd done it with Versamark, except because it's green, it's a little bit just less. It's still subtle, but not quite as subtle as Versamark. And you get very much of a tone-on-tone but variegated look, so that looks a bit more like real green, real greenery. The titles were punched from the 2022-2024 in color 6x6 glimmer paper, the Tahitian Tide, the light blue one, that lovely Tahitian Tide that we now have. And then I took each of the punched pieces and I touched it on all of its edges onto the Parakeet Party ink pad, basically direct to paper is what that technique is usually called. Then once I had those all ready, I then stamped using the black StazOn ink all of the letters because I needed it to show up on top of the glimmer paper really well, so that's why I used the StazOn ink. And then the subtitle underneath it is just a piece of pale papaya cardstock. You see 1.5 inches high by 3 inches wide, and stamped at the bottom with the perfect day to celebrate message from the Graceful Tiles stamp set using black memento ink. To assemble the card, started out centering that pale papaya cardstock right at the top, and then putting just some of the letters off to the left and right. Then I added, they're on dimensionals, and then I added the rest of the letters in the word Halloween on top of that subtitle card once it was on the card. So they were raised using dimensionals. The subtitle card was just glued straight on. Then I set up the gravestones. I just picked some in different colors, different shapes and different colors. I put some, glued for some down straight, and then I added the other ones that were going to be the ones closer in the foreground. I put them on dimensionals. So you see some look closer to you, some look more behind. Then I layered that piece of the stone wall piece on top using dimensionals. And then the last step is to take the the foliage, the greenery from willow tree, and I just cut it in various pieces and layered it, and I didn't actually use any dimensionals or anything. I just glued it wherever I needed to glue it using liquid glue so that it would stay on top. And here's the finished card again. These are the scrapbook pages that I made, and on the next slide I will show you the additional supplies that I used to make the scrapbook pages. And you can see here, again, I will make this information available later. And now to wrap up, I have some resources for you. Some of these are paid, but many public libraries have access to the paid ones. This is by no means a comprehensive resource list, but it's a place to start for you. This is something that you can go as deep or as light as you want in this process. I also wanted to show you, if you choose to do the DNA mapping, Ancestry is not the only one that does it, but I've done the Ancestry DNA mapping. You need to be aware that you still need to double check your results if they say that somebody's related to you, but it does give you, and they're constantly improving the geographical regions on it. And some last research tips to wrap this up. Not everything is online, but a lot of it is. Just verify, keep track of where you find information, make copies where you can, because websites go poof all the time. Allow for alternate spellings and misspellings. And if you hit a dead end, relax, take a break, try a different angle next time, or ask for advice. And there are also, if you're looking for particular countries or ethnicities, there are a lot of additional resources. For example, when I went through the Epic Immigration Museum in Dublin, Ireland, they actually have an office within the Epic Museum of people that you can pay a reasonable fee. I don't think it was that expensive, but I haven't followed up yet, for specifically Irish, as in Ireland, the island, genealogical research. So there are a lot of resources of additional places and that you can go if you're looking for particular information. The resources that I gave you are more general and not specifically tailored to any one country or ethnicity. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you and have a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of the presentations. Thanks.